Welcome into another chapter review of Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Today's chapter we're going to be covering is Three Heads Had the Dragon Governance under King Aegon. So we just had the wars with King Aegon, and now we're going to figure out how did he rule? What was his style? What was it like being governed by King Aegon? If you're new to the channel, welcome in. Listen, I enjoyed House of the Dragon. It just wrapped up here last Sunday. I really enjoyed it. So I decided I want to get in and I want to read Fire and Blood as I have right here for you. I want to read Fire and Blood. And I figured, there's a lot of people out there that don't have the time. I don't know how I have the time to read this or do these videos, but a lot of people who might want to know about this just don't have time to read. So that's what I'm doing, creating these episodes, and I'm just skimming the chapters. There's a lot of details from paragraph to paragraph. It's like one thing after another after another. I'm just trying to skim the details. If I miss something important, make sure you comment in this comment below. But yeah, let's dive into this. So I like how the chapter starts off. I mean, in the very first paragraphs, it says, he was a great conqueror, but many believe his most significant accomplishments came during the time of peace. I think that's what makes him such a great warrior as well. Not warrior, ruler as well, because I mean, you can be a great warrior and just sit upon the throne, but we're going to find out a lot of reasons why there was peace throughout the realms during his, I believe, 37 years of reign. Then it gets into him and what he felt was important, and it was not just to have like his family, people he knows, his friends in the government system in King's Landing. He wanted people from all seven kingdoms to be a part of it. He wanted, the lords of Westeros to send from every single kingdom, send their sons, their daughters to come squire, to come be a part of the government in King's Landing. And he felt that was very important for the structure of things, and to not leave anyone out, people not to feel included. Here it says, his former foes were encouraged to send their children to court, where the boys served as pages, cupbearers, and squires, the girls as handmaidens and companions to Aegon's queens. All right. Another thing it says here, because in King's Landing, they witnessed the king's justice at firsthand, and they were urged to think of themselves as leal subjects of one great realm, not a Western men or Stormlanders or Northern men. So he says he doesn't want you to think, he wants you to think of yourself as one big group, not that you're from the North or the South or, the Western lands, all right, or the Riverlands. Yeah. Okay. One way to ensure peace throughout the realm was tying houses together through marriage. And of course, Aegon, and a lot of it was his sisters, brokered marriages between a lot of the great houses, just so they can be a little bit tighter and less. Because remember, back before Aegon conquered this, these kingdoms were fighting each other all the time. If it wasn't one, it was the other, or another part, or two or three at a time were fighting each other. So to make peace, we start doing the marriages. You're going to marry into that house is going to marry into this house, and then that's less likely for there to be a war to break out. Pretty smart. Aegon's sisters / his queens also played a huge role. No one doubted that Aegon had the final say, but a lot of the decision making, a lot of the day-to-day stuff, or even bigger decisions, did come from the queens. They had a lot of power. And then here it says, it was the king's custom to bring one of his queens with him wherever he traveled, whilst the other remained at Dragonstone or King's Landing, oft as not seated on the Iron Throne, ruling on whatever matters came before her. So if Aegon's out and about, whatever queen that is back, staying behind, she gets a rule, and what she says goes. Now we get into something interesting about Aegon. He spent about half his time ruling. That means either in King's Landing or at Dragonstone. He liked Dragonstone a lot, but he split his time up between Dragonstone and King's Landing. So half his time, he's either at one of those two spots doing the day-to-day governing and all that stuff. The other half, he's out traveling. He's out visiting the realm. Yeah, it's not often that you would see your king, let alone Aegon the Conqueror. You would think that he wouldn't be coming from realm to realm to realm, but that's what he did. He liked to do it. And this is what he said. He said, it is better to forestall rebellions than to put them down. And then here he goes. They say that you would see the king walking through, and I pulled up the photo here, as you can see. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for those of you watching the video here. There you go. That's King Aegon. He would come into the into the towns riding on Balerion like that. And the town loved him. Everyone loved him. He was beloved as a king. And here's the reason why. Let's get into that. Said the small folk, this is what King Aegon believed. He said that the small folk needed to see their king and queens from time to time as well. The king added, and know that they might have the chance to lay their grievances and concerns before him. That is beautiful. So anyone, as we've seen in Game of Thrones and whatnot, can just sit on the Iron Throne and rule from there and say they're the king or queen or whatever and blah, blah, blah. But he says, no, you need to go out. You need to see the people that you're ruling. Because remember, Aegon lets them keep their customs. He lets them abide by their own laws and their lands. And he wants to go and learn about them. Not just learn about them. He wants to hear from the townfolk. He wants to hear what's wrong. Voice your concerns to me. No guarantee that he's going to fix anything, but let me hear your grievances. And he thinks that's very important for town folks to understand, to be able to do. And it makes sense, right? You want to just sit there and, curse the king out because you've never seen him or met him. But if the king is actually willing to come into your town, it's not like he's there all the time, but once every few years and you get to see him. I mean, that's pretty cool. Once again, I keep saying all these rulers in the Game of Thrones era, all these other Targaryens, they value themselves as having blood of the dragon or wanting to rule like Aegon the Conqueror, but none of them actually do what he does. It's like they don't study what he actually did as they just see him as the warrior, but they don't study how he governed, which is what we're getting into in this chapter. As I said before, he does want to know about the lands. He let them keep their customs, let them keep their laws. You continue as you were. I don't want to force you to do anything other than the fact that, you acknowledge that I'm your ruler. If I need to call on you, you're there. But he brought 6 maesters with him, minimum, everywhere he went, because he wanted to know the customs, the traditions, everything about the places that he was visiting. He thought it was very, very important to understand the cultures around the 7 kingdoms. Which makes sense, right? It does. And this is what he says. He goes, listen, the first law of the land shall be the king's peace, King Aegon decreed. Any lord who goes to war without my leave shall be considered a rebel and the enemy of the Iron Throne. So, I mean, if you had a problem with these realms fighting each other, you kind of put an end to that because none of them are going to go to war without your permission, and none of them dare be a rebel of. I mean, they just got conquered by the guy. They saw what he can do with Balerion and his sisters and the other dragons. It's like they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to get along. I guess we have no choice. He also, so basically how he did it was if there's any disputes inside a realm, that lord deals with it. He's not going to be the one to hear it. He doesn't want to pass judgment onto it. So that's that lord. So if it's if it's in the north, it's the Starks. They're going to deal with it. But if it's an issue between realms, then he's going to step in and he will decide what happens. Instead of them going to war, he will come in and he will rule and make his ruling, and that will be it. And that makes sense. It's kind of it's kind of like the states, right? The states, you have a dispute between states, then you take that up to the Supreme Court or federal. You look at federal stuff. If you have a dispute inside a state, you go to the state Supreme Court or the state legislature and you deal with it there. It's kind of the same thing. Next up, we look at the faith. So Aegon was not a religious man, but he respected religion in the faith and the power that the faith had, and he let them do what they wanted to do because he knew how much his subjects believed in their gods. And he also knew, I think it was a political move. It doesn't say it in here, but it sounds like a political move that he let the faith continue to do what they're doing. They can't be taxed. He always looked out for the septons and the maesters and all that. And so I think it was a smart move, partly because we're going to get into later on in this book what happens when Aegon is gone, because the Targaryen traditions kind of go against the religious aspect of everything. And so how do you have a faith, the high holiness, crown someone or acknowledge what this person is doing that goes against their own beliefs? So that gets a little squirrely later on, but at least while King Aegon's there, everything is okay. It's smoothed over and no one No one even bats an eye to it. Now we get into King's Landing. No one kind of planned it out, but this was pretty interesting. So he said, but it grew quickly. By 10 AC, it was a true city, almost as large as a couple of the other cities that are in there. By 25 AC, it had outgrown both of those cities and become the third most populous city in the realm, surpassed only by Lannisport and Old Town. So it's grown pretty quick. That was only 15 years. But the problem was King's Landing didn't have any walls. But Aegon, a lot of people said, who would dare attack King's Landing? You got Aegon there and you got dragons there. It's a good death sentence if you're crazy enough to do it. But Aegon started thinking about it, and it's probably had to do with the fact that his sister died. He felt vulnerable. So in 19 AC, he said, we're going to build a wall around King's Landing. He said that there's going to be 7 gates, one to represent each realm of the kingdoms, and it took 7 years, ironically. And so in 26 AC, it was complete. So by 26 AC, King's Landing was protected with walls. Now we get into King Aegon's his hands. Remember, in the last chapter we talked about Orys Baratheon, his good friend and his first hand of the first hand of the king. Well, he got captured. Remember, his hand got chopped off. And this is what he said. He resigned. When he got back after he got traded as a after being captured by Wiles of the Wild, this is what he says. He says, in his resignation, he says, the king's hand should have a hand. I will not have men speaking of the king's stump. That makes sense. So he goes off and he retires over to the Stormlands. And now Aegon has to pick a new hand, and he does. He goes through a few. He picks Edmund Tully next. That only lasts a couple of years. Wife gets sick. He has to go back. He ends up picking a couple more, and eventually in 17 AC, he ends up with Sir Osmond Strong. If you've been following House of the Dragon, you understand the Strong name is pretty important to that series. So there's where we see him. Next, we get into the Maesters. Aegon always had kept a Maester at Dragonstone like his fathers have done before him. But then we get into him wanting to learn more, and he valued the wisdom from these Maesters. And so let me just read some of this to you. He said, but the wisest and most learned men in the Seven Kingdoms were the Archmaesters of the Citadel. In 5 AC, King Aegon, feeling that the realm might, remember, we bounce back and forth. We get up into 25 AC, we come back to 5 AC, all right? So we bounce back and forth. But in 5 AC, King Aegon, feeling that the realm might benefit from such wisdom, asked the conclave to send him one of their own number to advise and counsel him on all matters relating to the governance of the realm. And such the Grand Maester was created upon King Aegon's request, okay? So that's how we got the first Grand Maester. It's smart. I think that's smart. You can't. It just shows how he's a great warrior. He understands the people, but then he understands his own weaknesses and that he's not above. He doesn't think he's the smartest person in the room. He knows he's not, but he's not afraid to learn more. I like that. Next up, we kind of get into the small council, even though there was no small council. I'm going to just read straight from this real quick to let you know what I mean. But basically, he had a small council, but it wasn't officially named a small council. He just started appointing positions to people. So the institution of a king's small council did not come into its full bloom until the reign of King Jaehaerys. But that is not to suggest that Aegon ruled without benefit of counsel. He had consulted with the Grand Maester a lot. He would often relate to taxation, debts, and incomes. He would sought the advice of the Master of Coin. Though he kept a septon at King's Landing and another at Dragonstone, the king often wrote to the High Septon of Old Town on religious issues and always made a point of visiting the Starry Sept during the yearly circuit. More than any of these, King Aegon relied upon the king's hand and, of course, upon his sisters. So he's not just a dictator out there. He has the final say, but he wants to hear from other people. He wants to be talked into. He wants to see all the options. Maybe there's something he's not thinking about. We get in, and it gets into a thing here about Queen Rhaenys. Queen Visenya was a little jealous of Queen Rhaenys and thought it was stupid that she would spend a lot of time with the bards and the singers and shower them with golds and anyone that wanted to get her attention. And she liked what they were singing. She would shower them in gold and give them a lot of attention. Rumors are that she was hooking up with some of them too. But one of the things that came of it that was really smart. It was actually like free publicity, or not free, but you paid for it. But it was great publicity. So she would shower these in King's Landing, these bards, these singers, and make them really wealthy, and they would owe a debt to her. And so what they would do, they would go throughout the seven kingdoms and they'd sing their songs and they'd be praising King Aegon. I mean, how great is that? That's free promotion. These town folks, these people that probably never even see Aegon or haven't seen him at that point, want to know, what is this guy like? What is he doing? What's going on in King's Landing? What is our, some of this is during the war. Actually, during Rhaenys time, it is during the war, because she died in 10 AC before the war was over. So these singers are going out there and they're pumping up the king. They're hyping him up. This is probably another reason why people really respected and liked King Aegon. Now, remember when I said that the queens had to make decisions themselves and they got to rule? Well, Queen Rhaenys was here was a scenario for her. So there was a guy that was brought before her, charged of beating and killing his wife. Well, the reason why he had done that is because he found his wife cheating on him with another man in their bed. And he said that he didn't mean to kill her. He just meant to beat her. And he was using a switch or a stick that was no thicker than the size of his thumb. Well, then she asked him, how many times did you hit your wife then? Because if you beat her skull in, you had to have hit her quite a few times. He says, I don't know. Now, the wife's brother says he had hit her. The husband had hit the now deceased wife 100 times. So now what does she do? Was this man in the right? Was this man in the wrong? How clearly we've got a brother here that's upset that his sister's dead, even though she was cheating on her husband. But is that right to let the husband, to take matters into his own hand? Well, here's what she said. An adulterous wife gave offense to the seven who had created women to be faithful and obedient to their husbands, and therefore must be chastised. As God has but 7 faces, however, the punishment should consist of only 6 blows. For the 7th blow would be for the stranger, and the stranger is the face of death. Remember, their God is a God that has 7 faces. Thus, the first 6 blows the man had struck had been lawful, but the remaining 94 had been an offense against gods and men and must be punished in kind. From that day forth, the rule of 6 became part of common law along with the rule of thumb. So just kind of, split the baby there. Didn't let the husband get off of it, but also condemned the wife for her adulterous acts. So the way this was settled was the brother got to take 94 lashes at the husband that killed his sister. Okay. Next, we get into Queen Visenya teaching Aegon a lesson. She wanted Aegon to wear armor and all that stuff, and the chainmail and everything around there to protect him. And he said, why do I need to do that? All right, listen, I've got the Kingsguard. I'm fine. And she was so livid and irate, she pulled out her sword and cut Aegon across the face. She cut the king, her husband and the king and her brother right across the face right there. I mean, anyone else did that, they'd be dead on the spot. But her point was, okay, you're protected. You got all these guards here. Look how quick I cut you right there. I could have taken your head, but I cut you instead. Kind of woke Aegon's eyes up and said, oh yeah, okay, maybe I should do a little bit more to protect myself. And remember, we talked about there was a lot of assassination attempts on his life in King's Landing. So she may have saved his life with that little lesson. Then we also get into her actually creating the Kingsguard. She said her brother needs to be protected and needs 7 Kingsguard, one for each of the realm. And one interesting thing that I thought about, I'm not going to get into all the names and who she picked or whatnot, but King Aegon wanted to hold a tournament for this and wanted to have the best fighters be around him. But she said, no, that's not what we want. She said, to be a Kingsguard knight required more than just skill at arms. She pointed out she would not risk placing men of uncertain loyalty about the king, regardless of how well they performed in combat. She would choose the knights herself. And she did. She wanted them to be loyal, not just skilled fighters, but loyal. And they came from all parts of the realm. It wasn't one from each kingdom. She just she picked them. And that's how we got it. And that's how they started signing the white book that we all know about. And there you have it. She made a point that it's not just skill. You need to have loyalty. You need to have faith. And also she came up with the idea that they should be like the people that go to the wall. They should give up all titles, everything like that. So they're to serve for life or until they're dismissed. And that's the end of the chapter for you. And I want to read the last part here. It said, there was 16 Targaryens that follow Aegon the Dragon afterwards, before Robert's Rebellion. Yet, if the Dragon's kings are considered solely on basis of their legacy, the laws and institutions and improvements they left behind, the name of King Aegon belongs near the top of the list, in peace as well as war. And he was an interesting ruler. Not just we know he's a great warrior, but I like his style, and I see why he was a beloved king. He let people, just the fact that you could be fighting him one day, and if you're defeated by him and still alive and bend the knee, he lets you keep all your lands title. He might even promote you, and then you get to rule how you were already ruling. It's pretty incredible. And he actually cared about his subjects, about the people he was ruling over, and he wanted to get that message across. He didn't want to just be the strong, powerful king that had a big old dragon that no one could stop. He thought it was more important to rule like a decent human being. So anyways, I really enjoyed that chapter. It was a quick one. Let me know what you think about King Aegon. What was your favorite part about it? Did I leave anything out if you've already read the book? I know I skimmed through quite a bit and I left names out and stuff like that, but trying to keep these nice and tight and short as much as I can. If you're enjoying these, please like, subscribe, share, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.